Hello, students. Myself, Dr. Amaresh Topalgatti, Associate Professor in Botany, SSBM Arts, Commerce and Science College, Badami. Today's topic will be on the morphology of flowers. Flowers are the reproductive parts of a plant. They are not only involved in reproduction, but are also a source of food for other living organisms. They are a rich source of nectar. Flowers can be of two types, like that of complete and incomplete. A complete flower is one that consists of sepals, petals, stamens, and pistils. On the contrary, an incomplete flower is one that lacks one or more of these structures. A complete flower consists of two parts, the vegetative part as well as a reproductive part. And the parts of the flower, the different parts of the flower are mentioned below. First, the vegetative parts of a flower. The vegetative part of a flower consists of the following parts. First one is the petals. This is a bright colored part that attracts bees, insects, and birds. The color of the petals varies from plants to plants. Some are bright while some are pale colored. Thus, petals helps us to differentiate one flower from the other flower. And these color are to attract the insects for the purpose of pollination. Second, the sepals. Sepal is a green colored part beneath the petals to protect the rising bud. Some flowers have fused petals and sepals, while a few have separate petals and sepals. We call it as polysepalous. Okay. Whether the reproductive parts of a flower consist of the different structures, reproductive structures. In different plants, the number of petals, sepals, stamens, and pistils varies. The presence of these parts differentiate the flower into a complete or incomplete flower. Apart from these parts, a flower includes the reproductive parts, stamens, and pistil. A flower may have only female parts, only male parts, or both. The reproductive parts of a flower consist of the following parts. The first one is what we call it as a stamen. This is a male reproductive organ and is also known as androsium. It consists of two parts, namely anther and the filament. The anther is a yellowish sac-like structure involved in producing and storing the pollen grains, whereas the filament is a slender thread-like object which functions for supporting the anther. And the second, the important reproductive structure is what we call it as a pistil. This is the innermost part and the female reproductive organ of a flower, which comprises three parts, mainly the stigma, style, and the ovary. This is collectively known as pistil. Stigma. It is the topmost part of a receptive tip of the carpel in the gynosium of a flower. It always present at the terminal part of the pistil. Whereas style, it is the long tube-like slender stalk that connects stigma and the ovary. So this is a connective between the stigma as well as the ovary. And the next, ovary, it is a ductless reproductive gland that holds a lot of ovules. It is the part of the plant where the seed formation takes place. Coming to the next whorl of the flower, the whorls of the flower, along with the vegetative and reproductive parts, a flower is also comprising of four whorls, which are largely responsible for the radial arrangement of the flowers. A typical flower has a circular section with a common center, which can be clearly observed and distinguished from top of the flower. These are of four whorls. The first whorl is a calyx. The calyx is the outermost whorl of a flower. It comprises the sepals, tiny leaves present at the base of a flower. These protect the flower whorls against mechanical injuries and desiccation. Some plants have colored sepals, the calyx, and are called as petaloid, as we see in case of Musandra, where the calyx are petaloid. They are having the color. If the sepals are free, the calyx is called as polysepalous, and if they are united, It is called gamosepalous. In many flowers, the sepals fall off before the flower even open fully. Such sepals are called caducous sepals. In some, the sepals fall off after fertilization. Such sepals are known as deciduous sepals. The persistent sepals remain up to the fruiting stages. So these are the three types based upon the nature of their duration: the caducous, the deciduous, as well as persistent sepals. Next, second whorl, the corolla. This is the second whorl of the flower. It contains petals which serve two main functions. The first function is to attract the pollinator. The insects, the bees, different pollinators are attracted by the corolla itself because of their various colors. A second important advantage of this corolla is to protect the reproductive parts of a flower. To protect the reproductive parts of a flower. Petals are brightly colored and scented to attract animals and insects for pollination. The calyx and corolla are collectively called perianths. Coming to the different types of corolla. Different forms of corolla are found in the flowers, like that of regular polypetalous, regular gamopetalous, irregular polypetalous, and irregular gamopetalous. As you can see in the figure, the first one under the regular polypetalous form, the first one is the cruciform corolla. The cruciform corolla, this is the cruciform corolla. This is a cruciform corolla. The cruciform corolla consists of four regular free petals, each differentiated into a claw and a limb, and these arranged in the form of a cross, as in example cruciferae, like that of mustard, radish, as well as cabbage. Second one, a caryophyllaceous corolla. Caryophyllaceous corolla. So in case of caryophyllaceous corolla, this form of corolla consists of 5 petals with comparatively long claws, and the limbs of the petals are placed at right angles to the limb of the petals and are placed at right angles to the claws, as in case of pink flower. Example, dianthus. Example, dianthus. The third form of corolla we call it as rosaceous corolla. This form of corolla consists of 5 petals as in the previous case, but these have very short claws or none at all, and the limbs spread regularly outwards, as in case of rose flower as well as tea. Coming to the second category, that is a regular gamopetalous. Under that we have the first type, campanulate or bell-shaped. When the shape of the corolla resembles that of a bell, this is called as bell-shaped or campanulate corolla, as we see in case of gooseberry as well as bellflower, that is campanula. Second, a tubular corolla. When the corolla is cylindrical or tube-like, that is more or less equally expanded from base to apex, as in the central or disc florets of sunflower, it is said to be tubular. A third one is called as infundibulum or funnel shaped, as you can see here in this figure. Infundibulum or funnel shaped. When the corolla is shaped like a funnel, that is shaped like a funnel that is gradually spreading outwards from a narrow base, as in case of thorn apple, like that of datura as well as ipomia. Fourth one, rotate or wheel shaped corolla. When the tube of the corolla is narrow and short, you can see here, short, and its limb is at the right angles to the tube, the corolla having more or less the appearance of a wheel, as in case of jasmine as well as brinjal. A fifth one is the salver shaped or hypocrateriform. Salver shaped or hypocrateriform. In a rotate type, the corolla tube is often seen to be comparatively long. You can see the corolla tube is comparatively long, as in case of Ixora. Is often seen to be comparatively long and the corolla as a whole more or less salver shaped, as in case of Ixora and Vinca rosea. Coming to the third category of corolla, that is irregular or zygomorphic polypetalous. So in this case, we have one special type of inflorescence which we call it as papilionaceous or butterfly-like corolla. Papilionaceous or butterfly-like corolla. The general appearance is like that of butterfly. It is composed of 5 petals, where the outermost of which is the largest and is known as standard or vexillum. The lateral ones, partially covered by the former, are somewhat like the two wings of a butterfly and are known as wings or alae. The two innermost ones, apparently united to form boat-like shaped cavity, are the smallest and are together known as keel or carina. You can see this arrangement. This is a standard, this is a wing, and this is a keel. Okay, thus they will form a kind of butterfly-like structure. So this is papilionaceous or butterfly-shaped corolla, as we see in case of pea as well as beans. Coming to the fourth type, that is irregular and gamma-petalous forms. So under this irregular and gamma-petalous forms, we have two types. The first one is bilabiate or two-lipped. In this form, the limbs of the corolla is divided into two portions. Or lips, the upper and lower lip with the mouth gaping wide open. You can see here, this is upper lip and this is a lower lip, and you can see the wide mouth open. So this is what we call it as a bilipped or two-lipped corolla, as we see in case of Ocimum as well as Basil. Are the two examples. Almost the members of the Labiatae, they do have such bilabiate or two-lipped corolla. The second one is personate or masked corolla. This is also two-lipped like the previous one, but in this case the mouth of the corolla shows the projection of the lower lip closing the mouth of the corolla, and this is known as a palate. This is known as palate, and this is seen in case of snapdragon. Seen in case of snapdragon. So this is a slide of overall forms of the corolla, polypetalous corolla and the gamopetalous corolla, where you have regular forms like that of rosaceous, cruciform, and caryophyllaceous. And in irregular form, we have the papilionaceous corolla. Under the gamopetalous corolla, under the regular forms, we have tubular, hypocratariform, the infundibulum, the rotate, the campanulate, as well as onciolate. Whereas under the irregular, we have ligulate, bilabiate, as well as a personate corolla. So this is the overall forms of corolla we do find in case of angiospermic plants. Coming to the next part of the floral morphology, that is, we call it as aestivation. Aestivation is the mode of arrangement of the sepals or petals, more particularly the later in a floral bud with respect to the members of the same whorl, that is a calyx or corolla, is known as aestivation. These aestivation are of following types, like that of valvate aestivation, a twisted or contorted aestivation, imbricate or irregular aestivation, and the fourth one is vexillary aestivation. So first one, the valvate aestivation. When the members of a whorl make contact with each other by their margin, or when they lie close to each other without overlapping, as in case of Annona and Calotropis, you can see here, where there is no overlapping, of the floral parts, and as a result, this is what we call it as valvate aestivation. Second one, twisted or contorted. When one margin of the sepal or petal overlap of the next one and the other margin overlaps the third one in a clockwise direction is called twisted aestivation, as in case of China rose, that is hibiscus, and also in cotton. You can see here there is overlapping, and this overlapping is always in the form of what we call it as clockwise arrangement. Overlapping will be there of the corolla. Okay. Coming to the fourth one, imbricate or irregular. When one of the sepals or petal is internal, overlapping on both margins, one of them is external and each of the remaining one overlaps lower margin and overlaps the next one on the other margin. Example in case of Cassia auriculata. So we call it as an irregular here because here we find there is no proper way of overlapping here. So where one will be overlapping the other and another, the lower part will be overlapped by the other. So that is the overlapping of the petals or the sepals will be in an irregular manner. So we call it as irregular or imbricate form. The fifth one is called as a vexillary. This is a special arrangement where one large petal covers the other smaller petals. The two innermost boat-shaped petals are called keels in this estivation. The plant of Peplinaceae or leguminous family exhibit the ideal example of vexillary estivation, where this is a characteristic feature of the Peplinaceae, where the Peplinaceous corolla will be there. So one will be the larger standard or the vexillum, and two are the wings or the alae, then keel or the carina, where the two innermost. And this type of estivation is called as vexillary estivation. Coming to the position of floral leaves on the thalamus. Based upon the position of the floral leaves on the thalamus, normally the calyx, corolla, androecium and gynoecium of the flower lie on the thalamus in their proper sequence. The relative position as seen in the flowers of different plants are of three kinds, like that of hypogyny, the perigyny, as well as epigyny. So these are the three types based upon the position of the ovary in a flower. The first one, hypogyny. In a hypogynous flower, the thalamus is conical, convex, flat, and the ovary occupies the highest position. The ovary occurs the highest position on the thalamus, while stamens, petals, and sepals are separately and successively inserted below the ovary. The ovary is said to be superior and rest of the floral members are inferior, as we see in case of mustard, brinjal, as well as China rose. You can see the position of the ovary is superior. It is seated on the thalamus. Second one, the perigyny. In a perigynous flower, the margin of the thalamus grows upward to form a cup-shaped structure called the calyx tube. You can see here, this is a cup-shaped calyx tube is formed, enclosing the ovary but remaining free from it and carrying with its sepals, petals, and the stamens. Here, the ovary is said to be half inferior. You can see here, this is a half inferior ovary, as we see in case of pea, bean, as well as gulmohar. The third one is what we call as epigyny. In epigynous flower, the margin of the thalamus grows further upwards. It grows further upwards, completely enclosing the ovary and getting fused with it and bear the sepals, petals, and stamens above the ovary. You can see in this figure where this is the ovary and you can see the other floral parts. Petals and stamens above the ovary. The ovary in this case is said to be inferior and the rest of the floral members are superior. Example, in case of sunflower, cucumber, as well as apple. Coming to the third whorl of the flower, that is androecium. The androecium is the third set of floral organ composed of stamens or microsporophylls. Ordinarily, each stamen is composed of a slender stalk like filament supporting a knob-like spore case of the anther. Each anther consists of two lobes, the anther lobes, connected by a connective which can be clearly seen on the dorsal side as an extension of the filament. You can see this is a connective. It is seen on the dorsal side of the anther. Each anther lobes again has two lobe pollen sacs or pollen chambers placed longitudinally. These are the pollen sacs or pollen chambers. There are longitudinal grooves on sutures along the ventral face of the anther demarcating the pollen chamber. Each pollen chamber represents a microsporangium and contains innumerable microspores or pollen grains. You can see these are the pollen grains and these are the pollen sacs. The stamen therefore is a microsporophyll bearing 4 microsporangia. While this is a normal case, there are some flowers where the anther possesses only 2 pollen chambers, which we call it as bisporangiate, and in Malvaceae, even these 2 pollen chambers are fused, developing a mature unilocular anther, where there is only a single anther lobe in case of hibiscus. Coming to the first part of the anther, the filament. In rare cases, a stamen may be devoid of a filament or sessile, as seen in the stamens of Arum maculatum, where the stamens are sessile without the filament. On the other extreme, a stamen may not develop any fertile anther when it is sterile and termed as staminode. In certain cases where the stamens do not produce the pollen grains. When the stamens do not have the pollen grains, they are termed as staminode, as is seen in case of cassia and canna. So cassia and canna are the examples where you have the presence of staminodes. The filament may be white or colored or yellow or blue or black in color, like petals. While the filament is ordinarily simple, in case of Ricinus communis, it is found to be branched. When filaments are very long, stamens protrude out of the flower and are termed as exerted pollen grains or anthers. On the contrary, when stamens remain within the flower, they are termed as inserted. Okay, depending upon the presence and what we call it as anthers, they are termed as exerted as well as inserted. Coming to the next part is attachment of the filament to the anther. On the basis of attachment of the filament to the anther lobes, they are of following types, like that of innate or basifixed. When the filament is firmly attached to the base of the anther, as in case of Solanum species, it is called as basifixed. Second, adnate, when the filament running the whole length of the anther from the base to the apex is called as adnate, as we see in case of Michaelia species. The third one is a dorsifixed, when the filament attached to the back of the anther, as in case of Bohunia variegata, where you find the dorsifixed anthers. The versatile, the fourth one is a versatile anthers, where the filament is attached to the back of the anther at a point only, so that the later can swing freely, as in see in case of Gramineae, as we see in case of Gramineae. You can see this is a basifixed anther, where the filament is attached to the base of the anther lobes, and we call it as basifixed. And here this is adnate, where it is fused with the anther lobes. Okay, it is fused along with the connective, and we call it as adnate. And here this is a dorsifixed, where it is a filament is fixed to the dorsal end of the anther lobes, and this is called as dorsifixed. And this is versatile, where the anther lobes are comparatively long, and to one end of this anther lobes the filament is attached, and this is what we call it as versatile anther. Coming to the next part of the stamens, that is adhesion of the stamens. So based upon the adhesion of the stamens, we have the first one, the epipetalous. Epipetalous, when the stamens are united with the petals. When the stamens are united with the petals, we call it as epipetalous, as in case of Datura. You can see here, where the stamens are united with the petals, so to form the epipetalous condition, as we see in case of Datura. Then epiphyllous condition, when the stamens are united with the perianth. When they are united with the perianth, we call it as epiphyllous, as in case of asparagus. You can see this is a where epiphyllous. So the perianth lobes are called as the tepals also. They are epipetalous, or they are tepals, and this condition is called as epiphyllous condition. A third one is what we call it as gynandrous, where the stamens are united with the gynosium. It is also called as gynandrium or gynostemium. It is also called as gynandrium or gynostemium. In this, both the stamens and and gynosium are united to form, here you can see the corona, as in case of Calotropis. You can see the staminal corona, where stamens and gynosium are fused together so to form the gynandrous condition, and this is what we call it as a corona or the crown. Coming to the cohesion of the stamens. Cohesion of the stamens means the fusion of stamens among one another or among their own components, like anther fused with the anther, filaments fused. On the basis of cohesion, androsium are of following types. And this fusion is what we call it as adelphous. When the stamens are united by their filaments, only forming bundle, free remaining anthers, the based on the number of bundles, it is of three types. The first one is monoadelphous condition. Mono means single and adelphous means bundle or brother. The filaments of all the stamens are united together into a single bundle called the staminal tube, ending in the free anthers. Example in case of hibiscus and rosa sinensis. You can see where all the filaments are fused to form a single bundle and anthers are free here. And this forms a single bundle. We call it as a monoadelphous condition. Second one, the diadelphous stamens. So di means two here. The filaments are united into two bundles, the anthers remaining free. Example, in case of Papilionaceus, in which 9 stamens are united in one bundle and one is free. You can see here. So 9 of them are fused to form one bundle and one will be free. That is 9 plus 1. And this is called as a diadelphous condition or diadelphous stamens. Third one is what we call it as polyadelphous stamens. Poly means many. When the filaments united to form more than one bundle, but the anthers are free. Such condition is called as a polyadelphous condition. Example, we do find in case of ricinus, andre audala, and also in case of citrus, we find polyadelphous condition. Coming to the types of androsium, according to the length of the filaments. So according to the length of the filaments, we classify into two types. The first one is called as diadenomous. In this condition, the flowers have 4 stamens, of which 2 are long and 2 are short stamens. That is called as diadenomous condition. Example in case of labate, here you can see 2 are short and 2 are long. 2 are short and 2 are long. That is called as diadenomous condition. The second, tetradynamous condition. In this condition, the flowers will have 6 stamens. The flowers will be having 6 stamens, of which 4 are long and 2 are short stamens. Example, the cruciferum members like that of mustard, radish. You have such a tetradynamous condition of the stamens. Coming to the fourth whorl, that is a gynosium. The gynosium or pistil is the fourth essential whorl of the flower and may be made up of one or more carpels, which we call them as mogasporophylls. A carpel has 3 distinct parts, namely ovary, style, and the stigma. The lowermost swollen fertile part of the carpel is the ovary. It encloses ovules. Above the ovary, elongated thread-like structures attached to the apex of the ovary is the style. The style ends with a round, sticky stigma. A sterile pistil is called pistillate. The number of carpel in a gynosium varies in different flowers. Accordingly, the gynosium may be described as follows. If the ovary is having a single carpel, or if the flower is having a single carpel, it is called as monocarpellary. Example, bean. It is called as bicarpellary. It is the presence of 2 carpels in the ovary. Example in case of solanum, where if there are 2 carpels, it is called as bicarpellary condition, and this is seen in case of solanum. There are also flowers which are having 3 carpels, which is called as tricarpellary. It is a presence of 3 carpels. Example in case of coccus. Tetracarpellary, it is a presence of four carpels. Example in case of cotton, where cotton, you can see the opening of the cotton buds. There are four. Okay, that is called as a tetracarpellary. It is a presence of four carpels. Example, cotton. Pentacarpellary, it is a presence of five carpels. Example, hibiscus. We also call it as multicarpellary. It is a presence of many carpels. Example in case of annona, Annona squamosa, and Anosa reticulata, sitapala, what we call it as annona. Coming to the first part of the gynosium, that is a stigma. The stigma, plurally, where it is called as the stigmas or stigmata, is a receptive tip of a carpel or of several fused carpel. In the gynosium of a flower, its main function is to attract the pollen grains from the air with its sticky tip for reproduction to take place. They may of different types like a simple, bilobed, bifid, and feathery stigma also. Different types of stigma may be there, like simple, bilobed, bifid, as well as a feathery stigma. So this is the stigma. Second part is the style. The style is a structure found within the flower. It is a long, slender stalk that connects the stigma and the ovary. The stigma is at the top of the style and is a sticky platform where pollen is deposited. After the germination of the pollen grains on the stigma, the pollen tube containing male gametes penetrate the tissue of the style to reach the ovule in the ovary. Further, it reaches the embryo sac and with the help of a filiform apparatus reaches the egg cell to fertilize it. So that is the main function of style, to facilitate the development of the pollen tube to reach the ovary. What is ovary? In the flowering plants, an ovary is a part of the female reproductive organ of the flower or gynosium. Specifically, it is a part of the pistil which holds the ovules and is located above or below the point of connection with the base of the petals and the sepals. Ovary after fertilization turns into a fruit, whereas ovules turn into seeds or fruits. An ovule is a structure found inside the ovary of the plants. Coming to the arrangement of the ovules in the ovary, that is what we call it as placentation. Placentation is arrangement of ovules in the ovary of a plant. The given diagram shows the types of placentation such as basal placentation, apical placentation, parietal placentation, and marginal placentation, axial placentation, and the free central placentation. So first one is a marginal. You can see this is a marginal placentation. In case of marginal placentation, one elongated placenta is located on one side of the ovary. Ovules are attached at the lines of the carpel margin. Example in case of legumes, where in case of legumes you can see here where the placenta is attached only on one side of the wall of the ovary, and this forms what we call it as marginal placentation, as in case of legumes. Second, axial. Carpels are folded inwards with ovules placed along the central axis of the ovary. You can see here where they are present in between the axis. These are the axis, and in between the axis they are present, and this is called as axial placentation, as we see in case of tomato. Parietal placentation. Ovules develop on the inner wall of the ovary. You can see here the ovules will be developing in the inner wall of the ovary, and this is called as parietal. Parietal means periphery, periphery of the ovary wall. Example in case of poppy. A fourth one is a free central. Ovules develop on the central axis while the septa is absent. You can see here the ovules will develop on the central axis without the septa, and this is what we call it as free central. Example, dianthus. You can see that this is the free central placentation. A fifth one is the basal placentation, where the ovules are arranged at the base of the ovary. At the base of the ovary, okay, basal placentation. Example in case of sunflower. Example in case of sunflower. So this is the whole morphology of the flower. Thank you.